And welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. My guest this evening is local genealogy expert and local author Greg Thompson. Greg, welcome. How are you?
Well, I'm good. How are you, Pete?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. So tell us a little bit about Greg Thompson, who he is, and why you got involved in genealogy.
Well, actually, genealogy is a very big part of my life. I've been doing it now for about 40 years.
Okay.
I started when I was about 15 years old when I went out to Ohio to visit my aunt, my mother's sister.
Yeah.
And she kept talking about family history and got me involved there. And since then, I've learned an awful lot about myself, and that's what genealogy will do for you. You learn a lot about where you came from and that type of thing. And it's learning your family tree, how to do your family tree. It's a lot of fun. I found a lot of fascinating facts out that I never would have known if I hadn't have done it. I've met a lot of fascinating people over the years. I couldn't imagine actually my life without the genealogy in it, because a good number of my friends are those that I have met through genealogy circles.
Really?
Yes.
Now, what, you personally, from doing your tree, what are some of the cool things that you've learned?
Well, I learned that I'm descendant of Pocahontas, the Indian princess from Virginia.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I have 22 Mayflower ancestors that I descend from. I also am a direct descendant of Charlemagne, the Emperor of Rome. Now, some people might say, you know, how do you prove that? But there are ways to do it. And I also teach genealogy. I have a class in Milford. It's a free class at the Milford Public Library where I teach people how to do genealogy.
Really?
Yes.
And let's talk about the class a little bit. What exactly like if I walked into your class to take the class, what's the first thing?
Well, depending upon what time of the year you came in. Now, we always start out fresh in September because we do have a lot of new people that stop in, and they're not always well versed on the subject we may be talking about.
Right.
So to make them feel comfortable, every September we do a beginning class, you know, how to do your family history. And we start from there. And throughout the year, we might talk about immigration and naturalization. We might talk about, you know, how to organize your records, you know, how to research in a foreign country, places you can go online that are free, and you know, other places that may cost but have valuable records on there, and things like that. It's very interesting. We usually have anywhere from 25 to 50 people at each one of our classes at the first of the month.
Oh, nice. And how long are the classes? A couple hours?
They're a couple hours. Yeah, it depends on the subject and the conversation.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Now, when you have the class, obviously you open it to question and answer, or do you?
Absolutely. What I usually do is if they have a question while I'm speaking, just go ahead and raise your hand, and then instead of having 30 or 40 questions at the end, it's easier to answer them as you're going along, because then you don't have to keep going back, you know, and checking what they're, you know, to find out what they're talking about. So this way I can answer the question right then and there and solve it.
And I guess how much prep time do you have to do for each class?
Well, actually, at this point, because I've been doing those classes for over 25 years.
You know what you're doing.
I basically don't really have much prep because I have PowerPoints that I've made up in advance.
Right, okay.
And a lot of them I rotate in and out throughout the year. So I might just pick one of them and go through it and see if there's anything I want to change. But generally, there's really not much prep. But in the beginning, when I first started doing it, obviously it would take probably 5 to 6 times the amount of time to set up the program than it would be to do the actual presentation.
Exactly.
Because you've got to do research and all that.
Of course you do.
Right.
And when you do the presentation, what's the presentation usually? Half hour, 45 minutes, or does it depend on the topic?
Well, it depends on the subject. I would say the least would be a half hour and the most would be an hour and a half. It depends upon the subject and how many questions there are. Now, the beginning classes are usually longer because you've got a lot of people that are brand new and they need to know, you know, where do I get this piece of information, or how do I set myself up? So we make, you know, we have printouts that we bring in for them to use.
Okay. And from what I understand by doing, speaking of research, my research the other day for tonight's show, I guess there's a book involved.
Yes, I recently had a book that was published. I was going to say,
let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, it's called The Articles of the Saybrook History Buffs.
Okay.
And I am the archivist for the Old Saybrook Historical Society.
Okay.
And I've been doing that now for about 4.5 years.
You like it?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. And as such, it's my responsibility to see what comes in and go through our archives and see what we have available that we can, you know, let people use to research. And I came across these articles that were written by a group called the Saybrook History Buffs.
Okay.
And they were originally part of SCAFA, which was the Saybrook Colony Founders Association.
All right.
Which has since merged with the old Saybrook Historical Society, so that's how we acquired these articles.
Right.
There's about 100 of them. What they did was they met once a month at each other's house, and they picked a presentation that they wanted to do, anything to have to do with the Saybrook Colony.
Okay.
Which involved, Lyme, Old Lyme, Westbrook, Cheshire, Essex, and Old Saybrook were all part of the original colony.
Okay. Sure.
And they would pick an article, and then they would present it at the house. And there, like I said, there's about 100 of them, and I just, when I saw them, could not put them down.
Right.
I mean, they range, the subjects range anything from about an individual such as William Hart, who owned the William Hart House on Main Street. Search for the Saybrook Platform. We have stories about the first fort in Saybrook. That's a lot of interest. There's a lot of people interested in that. All the way down to the old Saybrook Water Company. I'll bet there's many people that didn't even know that Saybrook had their own water company at one point.
Actually, I do know Saybrook had their own water
Yeah.
company because I read it in the book.
Yep. They did that primarily because of the trains that had come through, and they needed the water for the steam for the trains. So
Right.
that was why, and of course, eventually it went out of business.
Right.
But there's something for everybody in these articles, and if you're from Middlesex County, or even if you just love history, it's well worth picking it up and reading it because there's something in there for everybody. And I specifically set it up so that each volume, there probably will be 4 by the time I'm finished with the whole set.
All right.
There'll be approximately 20 articles in each book. And I set it up so that there would be something interesting for everybody. Like they originally had said, well, why don't you put all the stories about individuals in one volume and all the stories about houses in another?
No.
And I thought about it and I said, I don't really think that would be the best thing to do because then if somebody's not interested in houses, they wouldn't have any reason to get the book.
Exactly.
So far it's been a big hit.
Oh, good.
It was a lot of fun doing. I mean, like I said, I did not write the stories. I just edited them and put them in the book with the pictures. But it was a lot of fun. It took me about 6 months to compile this first volume.
All right. And
And we had a local artist, did the cover for me.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So it's really, really a nice presentation. And you can get those at the Old Saybrook Historical Society. We're open only on Thursdays, unfortunately, from 9 to 12.
Oh, okay.
Or you can go on our website, which is saybrookhistory.org.
Okay.
And you can order it online.
There you go. Now, what types of information can people get from the Saybrook Historical Society?
Just about everything imaginable. Most of our people come in because they recently moved into town and bought a house.
Okay.
And they want to know the history of the house. We have a lot of old antique houses in Saybrook. So that's the biggest reason why people come in.
Right.
And then, of course, we have genealogy. They might descend from one of the original families.
Okay.
So they want to know information about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you said you go to the archives at the Saybrook Historical Society?
We have our own vault, yes. Yep.
What can people find in the archives? Pretty much
You can find just about
anything you want.
You can find anything from wedding dresses to land deeds that were printed in the 1600s. I think our oldest one is 1681.
Really?
And
Very cool.
we've got just about everything. There's old maps. There's Fenwick, the
Yep.
borough of Fenwick.
Sure.
We have a lot on Katharine Hepburn. We have
Oh,
some
yeah.
of her photographs. We have some of her art that she donated to us. Just about everything you can imagine. That's the one thing about historical societies, that you never know what you'll find in there because they're all a gold mine and they're all different.
And does everything change from? Or is
Well,
it,
we have
or is it all the information pretty much the same?
No, we have people that drop information off. Like someone will bring a box of things in that they found in their attic, and that will increase to the collection. But if it doesn't follow the Saybrook colony, or it's not something
Right.
from the area, we'll find another archives to take it. So we try to keep everything local,
Right.
so that it has an interest in Old Saybrook.
I was going to say, are there other archives out there?
Oh, many, 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 yes. Oh, yeah.
Really?
You have a wonderful one in Hartford that's a state library.
Okay.
Just about every town will have a historical society.
Yep.
And then there's many out of state too. Well,
Really?
New York City has some really large ones. New York Public Library is a good example. They're all over the place. Just about anywhere you'll go, you'll find a historical society.
And one thing we didn't talk about yet, but we can talk about it now. I guess, what is the study of genealogy?
Well, put simply, it's finding your family tree.
Okay.
It's tracing your roots back to the beginnings. Now,
Okay.
some of us are fortunate to go all the way back, and some of us can't. For instance, if your ancestry came from Ireland, for example,
Yeah.
you probably will only get back till about 1800 because a lot of those records were burned. So if you get back to 1800 in Ireland, you're lucky.
Right.
However, if you go to Scotland, you can go back to 1300, 1400, and maybe even before that.
And why
So
were
it
the,
all depends.
why were the records burned?
Wars. There were
Okay.
different wars and
Okay.
fights that they had over the years.
Really?
Yeah.
That's something I didn't know.
Each country has its own set of records, and they're all in the native language.
Okay.
So if you're looking for a birth certificate from one of your ancestors that came from Italy, you're not going to find it written in English.
It's not
going to be in
new.
Italian.
No,
Exactly.
no, it's not going to be in. It's
Exactly.
Not, it's not going to be in English. And I guess one of the other things is if people want to get started studying genealogy and where they came from, how can they get started?
It's very easy, believe it or not. There's a couple things you can do. I'm sure you've all seen the advertisements on TV for Ancestry.com.
Mm-hmm.
And they usually offer a 2-week free session to go on there.
Yeah.
You can dabble there, but if you're really not sure, and most people that are starting out brand new need a little bit of help,
Okay.
you can go to your local public library and see if they offer any kind of classes like I do in Milford.
Right.
And you can walk in and they'll be more than happy to get you started. If you're in the Middletown area, for instance, you could go to the Godfrey Library and they will get you started.
Okay.
Any of your genealogy labs, Hartford, for instance, the State Library in Hartford is
Yeah.
a good place to go to if you have people from Connecticut.
Okay.
And that's how you do it. You just, find a library and start from there.
And is it pretty time consuming?
Very time consuming.
Is it?
Yep, very time consuming. You may spend an entire day in an archives looking for records and you may not find anything. And then
Really?
again, you may find a gold mine.
Really?
So I would say, in the beginning, genealogy is a hobby that you either love or you hate.
Right.
There's never an in-between. It could be time-consuming and overwhelming, and it can also take over your life, which it has done with me.
Of course.
But, there's a lot of worse things I could do. I think that's really great.
Right.
But, again, getting started, and of course what you would do is you start with yourself and you work your way back.
Okay. And like you said, you can start with yourself. What do you think the most shocking or the most important thing somebody didn't know about themselves can find out from doing genealogy?
You can find out whether or not you have any relatives that were not on the up and up, so to speak. You can sometimes find out whether or not you were adopted and you didn't know. You can find out, a lot of times people will do research and find out their siblings are not really their siblings, that they were adopted and they didn't know that.
Wow.
You could find that you may descend from a king or a queen from Europe. You might find that you had ancestors that came on the Mayflower.
Wow.
Any number of things. Descendant of a president. There's really
cool.
no limit to what you can find out there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And local genealogy expert Greg Thompson, would you mind sticking around?
Sure.
All right, we'll be right back.
Okay.
You can come out now. It's okay. Besides, it'll all be over before you know it. Honey, you promised. We need the space.
Dad, sometimes we all have to learn to let it go.
Need to let go of a few things? Drop them off at Goodwill and make room for a good cause.
We need a new house because this one is too small. We need 37 bedrooms in order to accommodate the dramatic increase in children. Yale New Haven Children's Hospital. This new house will be more specialized in the rooms that we provide and much larger to accommodate the sheer volume of families who are going to need us.
The Pete Mezzetti Show, sitting here, local genealogy expert Greg Thompson. Greg, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
Good to be back. So we were talking in the first segment about what exactly genealogy is and how people get started finding out about themselves and finding out about genealogy. I was wondering if maybe we can pick up from there
Sure.
and get into a little bit more detail.
Certainly.
All right.
Well, basically what you're going to do is you're going to start with yourself.
Okay.
And then you're going to go, of course, hopefully you'll know who your parents are, but believe it or not, there are some people that don't.
Right.
I was fortunate to have all 4 of my grandparents living when I started, so I was able to probe them for information.
Okay.
But what you want to do is you want to go to the oldest member of the family that you have still living and start asking them different questions. Now, when you're first starting out, you're not going to know what to ask them.
Right.
But if you come to like one of my classes or go to a research library, they'll give you a form that will have a list of questions that you would ask. And what you're going to do is you're going to gather information. What was their birth date? When were they married? Do they know when their parents died? Things like that, so that you can trace the family in using either census records or some other records that are available.
Right.
And then there are certain forms that we give you. We call it a pedigree chart, and it has you on the center, and then your father's on the top, your mother's on the bottom, and it goes back generations. That's how you keep yourself all together, so you know how you're going back in time. And then once you've gathered all that information from your family, then you can either go online or you can go to a local library and find information there. And there's information all over the place. And of course, we're fortunate now to have the internet,
Right.
which I didn't have when I first started out.
Right.
So now you can do a lot of things online. So that makes it easy for you.
Now let's talk a little bit about I guess there's a DNA aspect of things, and you can learn things from doing
You'll see
DNA.
that advertised on TV a lot for, Ancestry.
Yep.
Have your DNA tested, or 23andMe is another one,
Yep.
or National Geographic. And what they do is they do what they call an autosomal test on you.
Okay.
They'll send you a little cube, and you just put some saliva in it, seal it up, send it back, and then they put it in their laboratories and they test it.
Okay.
And what they find out from there is what percentage of each nationality you have. For instance, I just had mine done,
Really?
and it said I had 38% United English, United Kingdom.
Right.
11% Irish. It said I had some German in there and so forth. Nothing that really surprised me because I've been doing the research for so
Right.
long.
Exactly.
But there are a lot of people that sometimes find out that they have Native American in them and they weren't aware of that.
Really?
So that piques their curiosity that they want to find out how exactly that DNA came down. Now, some people that have their DNA done end up into trouble because, like I said, if you were adopted and your family never told you, and you had your DNA and your
Done.
brother's or sister's DNA done, it wouldn't match up. Now, it's
Right.
never going to be perfect even with an individual
Right.
because DNA jungles, and as it comes down, you may get more of a particular nationality in you than your brother or sister would.
Really?
So it's not going to be exactly the same unless you are a twin.
Exactly.
So it's
Exactly.
very, very interesting. And from there, what they do is they ask you to build a family tree online, which you can do very easily through Ancestry.
Okay.
And then through that, they compare your DNA with other members that have had theirs done. And sometimes you can find that distant cousin that you didn't know about and get in touch with them and gather information from there. I've met dozens of cousins that I never knew I even had that have helped me out with my research, and I've helped them with theirs. Very, very fascinating thing. It's still a new technology, and it's not perfect yet, but each time they have, and for instance, I've had mine done 3 times. The first time it told me I had 15% Native American in me.
Okay.
The second time it told me I had 5, and the one I had done recently said I had none. Now I know I do have Native American in me because I've traced it through the paper,
Yeah.
doing paperwork. But as the technology changes and the databases increase, you will find that will happen. That's why it's not a perfect science at this point.
Right. Do you think it ever will be?
Eventually. Yeah.
Probably.
I think you're going to find someday that when a child is born, that their DNA will be done immediately. And just like we have fingerprints,
Right.
we'll have DNA samples. And then everybody will be in a database. Sad to
Very
say, and it's a
cool.
little impersonal, but
Right.
I really do
But
believe
that's
that will
okay.
happen.
But that's okay. We
Yeah.
can, because nobody fair. Now let's talk a little bit about the online resource aspect of things. I know we talked about a little bit earlier. But
Well,
let's maybe get.
like I said, there's a lot you can get online. Ancestry.com is a perfect example.
Okay.
Although after your 2-week free trial, they do charge you, and it depends on what kind of databases you want to access as to what they charge you.
Right.
But there are many other free sites that are available. One is FamilySearch.org. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the Mormon Church, but the Mormon
I'm not.
Church, because of their religion, they do genealogy. So
Really?
they have sent photographers around the world to copy the world's records. So they have a very large collection of vital records, mostly from foreign countries.
Really?
And a lot from the U.S. as well. And that site is free. They cannot charge you to use that. There's another place called Cindy's List. Cindy Howell, who actually I had met.
Okay.
And what she did is she created an index of all the genealogy sites she could find on the internet. And you could go onto her site and punch in, for instance, you want to know about Germany.
Right.
You punch in German research and up will come all the links that she has to places she found.
Wow.
And that again is free as well.
And then that's probably pretty extensive of a
Very extensive.
very
yeah.
extensive website.
Yeah.
You can probably
It's
find
very
that on-
fascinating. Nowadays, years ago when I used to do the research, to go look at a census record, none of them were online. So you'd have to go to the National Archives, get a microfilm, and use their reader
Right.
page after page after page because they weren't indexed. And sometimes you'd have 1,000 pages on the reel,
on
and the record you want was on page 999. So there was no way. Now everything's indexed, so you can punch in a name and it comes up automatically for you.
Probably makes your job a lot easier when
It does. It
when
makes
you-
my job and to teach somebody new, it's a lot easier as
right,
well.
exactly, exactly. Now, let's talk about the research in other country.
Yeah.
Research in other
A
countries.
lot of people, not everybody has roots that go as far back as mine, say per se, in the 1600s to America. Some people their family may have only been here 2 or 3 generations and they came over from Ellis Island per se, or they might have come into Philadelphia or Boston. A lot of your Irish came in through Boston, a lot of your Italians came in through Ellis Island, New York.
Right.
So what you have to do from there is you have to remember that information will be in the native language. So if you don't know Italian and you're going to be researching in Italy, you better get yourself an Italian-English dictionary so that
Right.
you can work with it. But the good thing is all the records were done in a certain format. So once you learn the wording of one, you'll be able to jump from one record to the other.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not impossible. A lot of people think it is, but it's not.
No.
No. And you'll run into problems sometimes with, like if you get into Poland, for instance.
Right.
During the wars, the boundaries of those countries were changed so many times, so you may have to look in multiple countries to find the records you're looking for.
Now, I guess we can talk. Let's talk again. We talked about research in other countries again. Maybe let's expand about that a little bit.
Okay. Well, for instance, if your ancestry, if they were fortunate enough to come over and say Ellis Island,
Yep.
for instance,
Sure.
Ellis Island's records are all indexed. So Ellis Island has its own website. You could go on there and you can sign in. They don't charge to use it, but you have to create an account.
Yeah.
And you could punch in your ancestor's name and they will help you find what ship your ancestor may have come over, and also the
cool.
passenger list, which you'll have all that information. How old were they when they came over? Who did they come with? What port did they leave? What date did they leave?
Really?
And sometimes people will die on their way over, and they'll have a record of that as well. So it's
Really?
very, very interesting. And the website also sometimes has pictures of the actual ships that these people came over on, which
Very
makes it very
cool.
interesting. It is cool.
Very
It really is cool.
Very cool.
That's why I say genealogy is a avocation that once it gets you, it grabs you, and you just want to keep going and going and going and go back as far as you can.
Now,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
But there will be times when you'll have roadblocks and you'll get stuck, and that's why you ask when you get together with experts like me that can help you.
Right. Now, have your classes started yet?
Well, the ones in Milford are year-round.
Okay.
I used to have some in Old Saybrook, but after about doing 4 or 5 of them,
Yeah.
there really weren't that many more people that were interested, so I stopped
Okay.
them. But they do have, I do know we have them in Milford. I know Godfrey has classes
In
in
Middletown?
Godfrey all the time in Middletown, which is not really too far from here.
No, definitely not.
So you can hook up with them. And even if you're interested, go to your local library and tell them you're interested in genealogy, and maybe there had been other people that had come in and asked about it, and they can organize a group for you.
I was going to say, I'm sure if you walk into your local library and say, hey, I'm interested in genealogy, you think they'll be able to point you in the right direction?
Oh, absolutely,
or-
absolutely. Most libraries, even your small local libraries, will have something that's interesting in terms of genealogy. They might even have city directories, or they might have, different records from the area that you're in. Of course, they wouldn't have something from another town,
No, of
but
course
they
not.
would in the town that you're living in.
Right. Now, tell us a little bit about, but we have a little bit of time left. Tell us a little bit about the Old Saybrook Historical Society and what exactly you guys do.
Well, we are very fortunate. We have a wonderful archives. It's called the Frank Stevenson Archives. It's behind the William Hart House at 350 Main Street.
Okay.
We are open only on Thursdays or by appointment from
Okay.
9 to 12, and the house is open for tours. We have a beautiful museum home with a lot of old things in it. But the archives per se has, like I said, just about a little bit of everything for anyone. If you were from a descendant from anybody from the Middlesex County or say the early Saybrook Colony,
Yeah.
we would have something for you, because people have brought records in over the years and just dropped them there, and we've organized them so that they're accessible.
Really?
Yeah, really, really interesting. And I mean, I go there, and like I said, I've been there for 4 years. I still have not seen everything.
Wow.
And I look at things every week when I'm there.
That's pretty, and you're there probably every
I'm there
Thursday.
every week, yep, and then some. Yeah.
Very nice.
But it's a lot of fun, and it gives you a chance to meet other people in town, too.
Oh, other
Yeah.
people, I'm sure other people
Oh,
show
people
up.
drop in all the time.
Very
Yeah,
nice,
yeah.
very nice. Well, local genealogy expert Greg Thompson, we're about to run out of time tonight, so I want to thank you for coming down. Hopefully we'll have you on again
It
soon.
was my pleasure, Pete. Anytime.
All right.
Thank
On
you.
behalf of Greg Thompson, I'm Pete Mezzetti. Thanks, good night, and we'll see you next week.